Superman. This is my spoiler review. I have a spoiler-free version of this review over on my blog, soundofbettermyhead.com. You can check that out there first or instead of this, whatever makes you happy. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5. I think I almost gave it a 3.5. I just felt there was a little more. I was trying to keep my grades a little consistent, and some of the other movies that I've given a same score this year, it just seems a little more consistent. My grading system. Overall, the movie was solid. Just I think I had some issues with some of the pacing, some of the plot elements. Definitely too many characters. They took an interesting route where they kind of started in the middle. Not only of like this DC universe where like all these characters are established and Superman's been around for a little while, but also like basically in the middle of a battle. I am glad they didn't do the thing where you see Superman got beat up and then they cut back to 3 weeks later, 3 hours later. The story continued from there, which was a nice touch. I think one thing that kind of bugged me about the plot, I'm just not the biggest fan of a movie where the characters are always on the run or they're always on the back foot, where they're constantly trying to they're constantly being pushed down, and most of the movies, like I said, they're just struggling the whole movie. Then finally at the end, they're able to save the day or whatever. And that's a lot of what this movie was. Superman's constantly on the back foot. Gets beat up in his first fight. Then it's basically leads into an argument with Lois that he more or less loses. Then he has this big fight with the Kaiju that they stop it, but he can't keep it from being killed. And then the public turns on him. Then he's in prison, and it's just trying to almost the whole movie he's kind of getting put down. And I'm not always the biggest fan of that type of a plot. Maybe some people love it, but not my type of thing. And it makes it hard to get a beat on Superman in a lot of respects, because it's like you get a good idea about his personality, but just what he's capable of. When you constantly see him losing, it's like, okay, well, how big of a deal is Superman? You really got to wait to the end of the film to see him at his full power and full potential. So the first half of the film, I'm trying to get a vibe on what the Superman can and can't do, like how powerful he is compared to other Supermen we've seen. So that was kind of throwing me a little bit. And then the plot itself's got a lot of weird ups and downs, because like you said, it's Superman. He's in a battle, he loses, he has to recuperate basically for a little bit, and then he has another big battle, and then ends up having to take a second of recuperation later on when he goes back to his the Kent farm. So it's kind of weird. It's a weird flow. The Superman's story basically in that sense. But as far as the characters go, Superman, I thought they did an awesome job. I think he's pretty much a perfect interpretation of Superman. I think they take a lot of what's always worked with him, especially a lot of inspiration from the Christopher Reeve Superman, and apply it to a modern day Superman. It almost feels like what Man of Steel could have been. I think David Cornsweet looks a tiny bit like Henry Cavill. So it's almost like this is James Gunn saying this is what I think a modern Superman would be, compared to what Zack Snyder said I think a modern Superman should be. And I said Zack Snyder really is no, he'd be serious, where James Gunn's no, we want to take the classic elements and just translate it today. I thought Lois was pretty good. It's a little weird seeing her be so proactive. She wasn't the damsel in distress, which is good. In fact, she helped save Superman. But I think she was almost a little too proactive. She's flying the Mr. Terrific ship around. She's super into helping out, which is different take slightly. There's a little bit of, have you ever watched the Superman and Lois TV series where they're married? So I guess it works when they're a couple, that she's more willing to go out of their way to help them. It's not really a nitpick. It's just an observation of how her character is in this film, but it's fine. I don't got a problem with it. As far as the other supporting characters on the good guys side of the row here, really enjoyed Guy Gardner. Thought they did a good job with him. Wish we would have got just a smidgen more of him. Mr. Terrific is a weird one because I don't know as much about his comic book version. I know the Arrowverse version, which was a little bit more unsure, so I was a little shocked to see this kind of cocky badass version of the character. I don't know which one's the real one. Enjoyed both versions for different reasons. I think this one was just a little guarded, so you don't get to know anything about him. You just say, okay, he's a badass and he's really smart, but what more is to the what is there, to him besides this? You really don't know anything about Hawkgirl. She's just kind of there, and there's so many different interpretations of Hawkgirl in the comics. It's like, okay, which one is this? The alien, the reincarnated goddess? Like, what are we doing here? And they never get into it. And she really doesn't get to do a ton. And she flies around, she screeches, and she hits some stuff with her hammer, or her mace, I should say. Daily Planet, they were fine. Everyone just kind of popped up. Like, Perry White was just kind of there. Like, he had a few moments, but Jimmy Olsen's the only one that got a real shine. I thought he was really good. Thought they overdid with the Planet staff. It's like, okay, it's cool. You go to the Daily Planet, you meet everybody, save them for a later movie. They're not really necessary for this plot, but they kind of kept coming back to them. And for some reason, they all had to load up on Mr. Terrific's ship just to like send out this article. I'd like, okay, like we don't need all 5 or 6 of these people to continue this story. I really just at that point you needed Lois, maybe Jimmy, especially with what we've seen so far in this movie, but didn't really take away from it that much. It's like, okay, why do we need all these guys here? There's already enough characters fighting for screen time in this story. The Kents were fine. I was a little shocked to see him go like so hardcore, like redneck with them, like almost like Southern Bumpkin kind of, caliber. They do make them better at the end when you get to actually flesh them out a little bit. And I think Pa Kent had like one of the best moments in the movie with his speech with Clark. Basically, motivating them to move on. I think that's it for the good guys for the most part. Bad guys, there's been so many different versions of Lex Luthor over the years. I thought this was a good interpretation of him. Very extremely ruthless and deadly. Like, I think he's almost a little bit more murderous than some of the other ones. No clue on, besides envy and jealousy, I don't know much about his backstory, what motivates him. So I think he's a little bit one-dimensional that way. Like, there's been other Luthors that they've dug into, like, his rough childhood and a lot of other stuff, and like other stuff that motivate him. So I thought it was a little on the light side. The engineer, again, I don't know a lot about the Authority, but I think she's supposed to be more of an anti-hero. Like here, they kind of went more like a flat-out villain. That was also strange that I believe Luthor said that he gave her powers in this universe, and he also created Ultraman. So it was kind of weird right off the bat. Like 2 of the bad guys were all created by Luthor, and especially as big as this universe is supposed to be, it just kind of sucked that like all the bad guys were coming from like one place. Ultraman himself, he was all right. Was a decent twist that he was a clone of Superman. I think a lot of people are hoping that leads to Brainiac down the road. I don't know. That was actually kind of more, I think it works best if you took him off the board at the end of the movie. I mean, yeah, you could probably do some roundabout way where he comes back, but he never talked really, so he wasn't really compelling outside of the fact that it was just a clone of Superman. Then Miss Tessbacher was kind of a weird character. Like, it's hard to get a vibe on her because I don't know. She's just, I'll be honest, I just didn't care for her character. She works for this as a plot element, but it's like, I don't know. First of all, I don't know why Lex was even worth her in the first place. And I can see she could be a little too much, but it's like, not even 100% sure why Jimmy was so repulsed by her, basically. It was a weird thing. Like, it's like, okay, what are we missing here? But I do like in the original Superman, Miss Tessbacher basically turned on Lex and helped Superman, and she essentially did that here. So that was a nice follow through. That brings me another nitpick. On one hand, I appreciate they're using a little bit of John Williams' Superman score from the '78 films, and they also do a modern interpretation of it, and they also do some of like the on-screen font with the Superman names and stuff like those old movies. But on the other end, it's like, it's cool to be inspired by that, but I almost want to see James Gunn move beyond that. It's like, okay, that '78 Superman was great, and there's a lot of great stuff in there, and to bring over, but it's like it kind of harkened back that almost a little too much. It's like, oh, let's just move on. You created a really good Superman here. Let's let it be your own thing. As far as the look of the film, I thought it looked pretty fantastic, very colorful. I thought most of the CG looked good. I thought the kaiju looked incredible. A couple parts where it didn't, but overall, I thought it looked really well. It looked really good, especially like some of the overhead shots. I thought the interdimensional rift looked a little weak. I thought the anti-proton river looked a little mediocre. Like, just didn't look like they were stuck in anything. Just a bunch of crap, little glowy bits. I thought Baby Joey looked terrible. Like, it didn't look like at no point did I feel like they were trying to save a real baby. It's like you're holding up a CGI something or other, and it's not. You're taking me out of it, and you're stuck in the CGI river, and the whole scene. It's losing my interest. I enjoyed Crypto overall. I think he was a little over the top with his, how much of a bad dog he could be. I think he looked pretty good, and even when you knew he was CG, I think it still looked good. So I think it worked. James Gunn's usually known for packing a lot of humor in his movies. I think there was a few jokes that there wasn't as much here overall. I think some of the jokes really did land. I think a couple did not. I think a couple was just kind of like, all right, you didn't really need the joke here. I think it kind of killed a more emotional moment. James Gunn's also known for his needle drops. He only had like two, one kind of in the middle, which didn't feel like the perfect place for a needle drop. Like, Mr. Terrific whooping a bunch of people around and kicking their ass it was a cool scene, but it didn't feel like it earned the needle drop. And in the end, I thought sold it, especially with really well done emotional moment of Clark switching out the hologram of his Kryptonian parents with the family videos of his human parents. I thought that was great. Loved the Supergirl cameo. Definitely ties into what we know about what her movie's going to be, so that was pretty cool. They hadn't really no opinion on the Superman robots that helped them out. They were just kind of there, and I know someone else pointed out that they claim that they have no emotions and they're just robots, except they act like they got emotions, like they want to have names and they're giggling because Superman looked at them. So that was kind of weird. And another nitpick, they had Alan Tudyk doing one of the main robots, which is fine. I like him in a lot of stuff, but he basically sounded just like K2SO. And it's like nothing was really done different with his voice. He's like, that's K2SO. And even a little bit of sassy attitude in there. But I mean, I like it. I like the actor. I like the K2SO, but it's like, oh, you're just doing K2SO again. And then I was a little disappointed there was really no real post-credit scene. It was just that weird scene with him and Mr. Terrific looking at a crack in the wall. Definitely not worth sticking around for. I'm sure there's plenty of other stuff I could say. I mean, like I said, a lot of characters just felt like they were just kind of there. Like Rick Flag kind of Senior shows up and he's just kind of there. He doesn't have a lot to do. There's probably other characters I can't think of that just kind of come and go. Like, all right, we don't. Like Otis is. I guess the only reason he stands out because they say his name. Otherwise, he'd just be like a generic henchman for Luthor. I guess I'm not going to even bother talking about him. But I suppose it did. And also another thing in the ending, if you really think about it, does it make sense? Like, they said Luthor was a traitor and they arrested him, but what he was doing was selling arms to an ally, a United States, and in return, he wanted some of the territory in their enemy's country that he was going to take. Like, so, like Elon Musk gave like Israel weapons for cheap, and then if he wanted like a little piece of the Gaza Strip, would that make him a traitor? Because he's helping a U.S. ally, and yeah, he's getting something out of it. I mean, maybe the U.S. government would want, their cut of the pie, but is that a traitor's thing? And there was evidence that Superman's parents said him as a conqueror, so is he wrong for trying to take out Superman? It's kind of nitpicking. Like, you're trying to make, this is a comic book movie, and it feels like a comic book movie, and it's a little cheesy at times, but it works. So I don't think me getting into the real world aspect of some of this stuff is a big deal. But I'm going to call it there. I think that's enough to talk about it. Otherwise, I'm going to have like a half-hour long video. So, like I said, I have the spoiler-free version of this review. I have some other movie reviews. I got TV reviews. I got my comic strips that I do. Got all that stuff over at soundofbettermyhead.com, so if you want to check any of it out, that's awesome. Other than that, thanks for watching.